Shut my phone off.
Hey everyone, good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. I am here today with my friend and awesome guitar player Shane Theriot, who was
Hey, everybody.
kind enough to join us today. As you may or may not know, let me run down your ridiculously great resume, Shane. Of course, you play in Daryl's house. You play either band director on that, musical director. Uh, Hall Oates, I'm going to read off your list. Neville Brothers, Willie Nelson, Dr. John, Jewel, Beyonce, Ricky Lee Jones, Boz Scaggs, Madeline Perot, Larry Carlton, Leanne Rimes, John Waite, Branford Marsalis, Johnny Resnick, Lenny Stearns, Sam Moore, Nick Nolte, Gavin DeGraw, Randy Brecker, Aaron Neville, Ben Folds, Amos Lee, The Sin, that's with Chris Squire and Alan White, Little Feat, Sammy Hagar, Alan Toussaint, Forrest Whitaker, and Harry Shearer, and probably more people that we even have not gotten to on this list, right?
Yeah, maybe a few more, but yeah, that's what happens when you can't do anything else. That's what I was saying. That's what happens when you whore yourself out for music. End up with a big resume.
Big resume.
No, I'm just joking.
Well, first off the top here, I want to thank Phil for moderating as always, and as always, Shane has some instructional material over at TrueFire, and there's a link in the bio in my description, and Phil will share it. And that way, if you want to pick up some of Shane's courses, which are really great, I've checked them out, and I've stolen a few things from you, man.
Oh, come on, really?
Yeah, your dominant 7 sharp 9 chord, man, with the open string. In one of your courses, you talked about this. You know what I'm talking about?
Let me switch chairs. So I want to hear that while I grab the chair.
Oh, hold on. I think. All right, hold on. I'm not plugged into my guitar, but you went, you put in that dominant 7, your open E string was the sharp 9, right? Didn't you do something like, what was that?
I can't see you.
I'm trying to remember, man. I'm trying. Anyway, nobody can see this.
Yeah. Oh, there's this one.
That's the one.
Which is like Taxman chord.
Yeah, but I had never thought of that. Okay, we'll get to all this stuff. We'll talk about that. That was one thing I never thought about. So the courses are awesome. I loved your courses, and
well, you're the TrueFire king, for sure.
Well, one of them, yeah. I just appreciate that. Thanks. And so yeah, like I said, if you want to help out Shane, we have the tip jar. Share it with everybody, and thanks for everybody being here. And so I'm going to leave Shane to just talk a bit about guitar, and we're going to come back, and we got some great stories and some cool shit to talk about. So you can take it away, Shane. Just do a little, whatever you want to talk about.
What do I do now?
You just
tell me this.
I did. I told you like a little kind of lessony thing, something that you want to talk about.
A little lessony thing?
Yeah, just what's the cool thing you want to talk that you like showing somebody? And then if not, we could just talk about guitar. And yeah.
Well, let me think about that. Could I just play something and maybe
absolutely
extrapolate something?
Yeah, perfect.
Out of that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I think this is something I've been working on lately with voicings.
Oh, cool.
Might be interesting, hopefully. So let's see. I'll just see if I can loop it and get this looper to work this morning. Let me do that one more time. Is that enough level?
Yeah, man, it sounds good so far.
All right. Sorry, everybody out there. I've never done this before. I've never used Skype and done it. So here we go. It's just a little progression I was working on the other day to practice over. And it's like A minor. It is A minor. But instead of playing, you know, standard F, G, what I was doing was I was approaching these chords, which is a just an A minor triad, the root, the fifth, and the third. But then I was approaching it with this technique where it's like a classical technique. I guess it's a flat six. But then I was bending it, so I was going. And then instead of playing an F, I was doing a version of an F, but like more of a, I guess that would be a sharp, a Lydian kind of sound. Actually, an E minor 7, like that. So it just makes it more interesting, you know, voicings to practice like that. And then I was soloing over, you know. So it's things like that I'll practice sometimes, try to make it more musical.
Now, when you're soloing over that stuff, what are you thinking about? I mean, like scales or making changes? 'Cause I teach a lot, you know, during the week, and talk a lot about thinking about chord tones and things. So what's the mental process when you're soloing over something like that? Are you just hearing it, or are you thinking about scale, like chord tones? Are we going to nail those notes? What are you thinking about?
It depends on the chord progression. Depends on a lot of things, but generally I'll go instinct first. And if I think it's like if the chord progression has a pivotal point where it's a sweet chord or something, I'll think, well, I'm playing an idea and I would try to want to lay into that chord and maybe make a melody resolve into that beautiful chord. If it's a static one chord thing, then I don't know, I'm thinking more phrasing, I guess. I try to think phrasing over everything and rhythm. And then secondary, I'll think scales and things, or chord tones. It depends on how difficult a thing is, you know. But for that particular thing, I mean, that's A minor. That's F. I mean, you could do the Stairway to Heaven thing and just stay in. You could just stay in A minor the whole time and it sounds fine. But it's nice to, I might try to think of that as F Lydian.
Okay.
So, you know, that note would be your color note, as you know. So I might something like that. So I'll think it's all of the aboves to answer your question. I mean, it's a mix of chord tones and phrasing. If you just have that, you can make a lot of music, real rhythm and chord tones.
Absolutely. Now, when you talk about rhythm, so are you thinking about like repeated? Can you talk about what you mean by rhythm, just in your concept?
Well, I just mean phrasing. Phrasing is another way to do it. I mean, rhythm. I remember Scott Henderson. One of the things he showed once, I remember sitting with him, and he said, "Man, rhythm is the most important thing." And he said, "Can you tell me what song this is?" And he went, you know,
right.
And I went, "Jingle Bells?" He goes, "Right." And it was a completely atonal version, like completely nonsense. But the rhythm is so strong, you got it, you know? So you could actually play wrong notes in it if you sell it enough, you know. So that was an important lesson. So what I think about when I mean rhythm, it's not necessarily all rhythm. It's phrasing, making an idea connect, you know. That's why the great players, like, it doesn't, regardless of genre, I mean, in my opinion, you know, like Dave Gilmour, or you have Michael Brecker on the other end of the spectrum, they know how to phrase ideas, musical ideas, you know. Am I staring like that way, or
No,
I
no,
don't
you're
know which
fine. Yeah, you're
camera?
straight ahead. The one you're pointing at is where you should be.
I look like one of those, documentary interviews where they're like talking over here. It's like, who are you talking
Well,
to?
here's my thing. Like my main camera is here, but my computer is here. So sometimes I'm looking. It's hard to get this all right with. I got an iMac, so
Yeah.
I can't put my camera in front of it, so it's kind of funny. So it's all. Well, who cares? This is guitar stuff. But so one thing. Well, let's talk about your background a little bit. So where did you? Can you just tell us where you're from and how you started playing guitar and just the basic? Because you play all different sorts of styles, and your resume is really varied as the kind of gigs that you do. And I think I feel like you and me and all of our friends were guys who like so many kinds of music that you can't imagine.
Well, that's because we were, the era of growing up, like mid '80s. It was just a gold mine for guitar players,
Yeah.
man. I mean,
Yeah.
and early on, I mean, to answer your question, I was born just outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, and spent most of my life here, up until lived around here till I was 16, 17. So I absorbed a lot of stuff from living here. South Louisiana has a lot of there's tons of festivals. Music is a big part of life here. All over, every culture, every demographic, there's all kinds of, everything is drinking and celebrating something. So there's a lot of music. So my dad would take me to Cajun music festivals. He would listen to all kinds of, he was a big music lover, even though he wasn't a musician himself. My mom's family, they were musically inclined, although they weren't professional, but they did play piano very well. I think one of my aunts played with the symphony for a minute. And I don't know, I just knew I wanted to play guitar.
Yeah.
And then around the time I was about 14, I just decided I liked all kinds of styles. I like to dabble in different things. So I ended up, I'm learning how to read music on my own, and I just took it from there. I knew I wanted to be a professional guitar player, whatever that meant. I wasn't trying to be some rock star or anything like that. I wanted to be a professional working guitar player. That was my goal when I was 15 years old.
It's funny. I remember I was in Scotland visiting my relatives. My aunt, who was the one who actually not personally introduced me to David Bowie, but I was a kid, said you need to listen to David Bowie, and Queen. So and then I remember I was playing guitar at that point, and I remember the neighbor was like, "Oh, what do you want to do when you're older?" I'm like, "I want to be a professional guitar player," and they were like, "What?" This is the same exact thing at that really early age. I knew the second you picked it up, you're like, "This is it. I have to figure out how to do this," But you're totally right, and I want to talk about Louisiana because it's such a strong. I think that's a huge part of your playing as a rhythm guitar player, and I'd like to talk about that because you can tell where somebody's from. Like something I wrote. People say, "Yeah, you're from New York." You can sometimes tell if that makes sense. There's almost like a New York guitar sound at times. And but being kind of coming of age in the '80s was amazing, right? I mean, think about all the guitar magazines and everybody. It was Eric Johnson was in the top 40, and Joe Satriani had a hit. And
Eric Johnson would be on Austin City Limits, and like I remember my dad calling me into the in front of the television, going, "Look at this guy,
Mm-hmm.
he's good," and it was just it was Joe Satriani was on the radio.
I know. It's such a different time. It's amazing.
In my day,
when I was a kid. So can you talk a little about the influence of where you grew up on your, say, rhythm guitar playing? Because,
well, I mean, I was I could play over changes and not well, but I understood jazz. I mean, around the time I was around 15, I could play all this Yngwie stuff like everybody back then who was any good, Eddie and all that stuff. I could do all that stuff, Steve Vai, but I was a fairly good sight reader because I was taking classical lessons, and although I'm a hack classical player, I'm a fairly good sight reader, and then I started learning jazz harmony, and I got way into jazz, so I quit everything else rock stuff. So I just immersed myself in jazz for a long time, and rhythm stuff, I don't know. I didn't become I was a pretty good rhythm player, but if you're asking specifically about rhythm playing, I didn't become a really good rhythm player until I joined the Neville Brothers.
Okay.
And I was about 25. That was 90s, I don't know, late 90s, 97, something like that. And that's where you get it together, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a gig like that with the real shit going on, you know. And so that was a learning curve. I mean, I did know a lot of the repertoire. I mean, I grew up hearing, like my mom had, you know, some Meters records and stuff when I was a kid. And you'd hear that stuff like on the school bus locally. But it wasn't until I really played with those cats and got on stage, you know, and then you're like, whoa, it's like driving a friggin' 18-wheeler all of a sudden. It's like, here it is, here's the keys. And you're like, shit, I got to drive, you know. That was a learning curve. But I got it together, you know, and so I didn't intend to become known as a rhythm guy, but I noticed that I started getting a lot of calls in Nashville and other places because of my rhythm playing. And so I was like, hey, I'll take it, you know. And I enjoy rhythm playing a lot. It's fun. And I think it's an overlooked facet of what guitar playing has become. I think so. Anyway, I don't know.
Well, I mean, certainly, I think so. As I think Rick Beato was saying that, you know, the guitar is now strictly lives on YouTube and Instagram as a really kind of success, as something that's successful. And in those things, it's usually this virtuosic stuff, which I get a little overwhelmed with. You know, you go through these Instagram feed, you're like, oh my God, you know. But can you do me a favor? I love when you do that kind of New Orleans rhythm. Can you just give us a little example of some of the stuff you might have picked up from playing with the Neville Brothers?
Well, yeah.
And what's behind it? Like, is there a thought process, you know?
Let me turn. I can't really hear myself that well.
Okay.
Sure, I'll give you an example. Yeah.
So once again, guys, while Shane's doing that, he's got 3 great TrueFire courses that are available in in my description, and Phil's hitting those up. That's a great room you got there.
Thanks.
Looks nice and comfortable.
Work in progress, but it's had a lot of I'm really thankful over the last 4 months or however long this has been that I have this space, because for years I didn't really use it the way it should be used. And so yeah, I'm thankful that any of us that are lucky enough to have a workspace like yourself or whatever, man, now's the time to use it. Okay, so yeah, I mean, like, you know, this is like this is a Meters tune called People Say. That's the Meters, which are another really famous New Orleans funk, you know, inventors of a lot of stuff, and that's the same repertoire as Neville Brothers. But like some things, let's see, I break this down in my course a lot, so this is a little rudimentary for some people, but like this rhythm, that's a. If you speed it up, it's Bo Diddley, right? It's a 3/2 clave, and it's also a famous tune. I mean, the Dixie Cups in New Orleans, Iko, you know, Jack Mofinane, that's a 3/2 clave, and Pocky Way, little bitty boy, you know, with a heart of steel, 3/2 clave. And so that would be a rhythm you'd play, but you could vary and put little variations on it. it's just
That was awesome.
I don't know. I would never play that on a gig because I was just kind of showing off a little bit. But it's like those are all little moves you could do
Can you?
in that idiom that wouldn't sound out of place. Because I notice a lot of stuff, Jeff, like the New Orleans thing is totally different. Like you see a rhythm guitar course or a funk guy that wants to do something funk, and you'll see him. I've seen a few where they'll do this. All these voicing. Whatever, I'm not doing a good. It's just not the right guitar. You need a Strat, out of faith. But if I played that on a gig, I would have gotten fired the first gig. It just doesn't fit. It's like it doesn't groove, and it's like you're fighting with everything. There's no. It's like Art Neville was the keyboard player in the Meters. He was one of the founders of the Meters, and he was in the Neville Brothers, the keyboard player, rest his soul. And he used to tell me all the time. He's like, it's like a washing machine, bro. It's a washing machine groove. He would do like a washing machine was, agitating or whatever they call it, the cycle. And I was like, it took me a while to figure out what he meant was the spaces in between the notes, You can hear it go, and it's in those little moments of silence. That's tension. That's why people were doing it. It's like, whoa, what's going on? It's a good tension.
Mm-hmm.
And those little pushes are what creates funk. That's what funk is. It's like all the little in-between shit that you don't play. That's a whole art to that,
Yeah, which you obviously just showed really pretty brilliantly. Can you just, there's one can you just show us one little variation? Because I know people, you were saying, you guys may know this, but everybody just loves these kind of things, and I found from the feedback we get. So you were just kind of vamping, and you hit that kind of like flat 3 naturally. Can you kind of show that little move? Just like one little.
Oh yeah, well
little phrase.
That's something. Yeah. Well, that's something that I'm not saying I invented it, but
of course not.
I came up with it. I came up with it on my own, just out of boredom, like being on the gig and playing a 1-chord thing, and I was like, what could I do to sort of, I don't know, maybe I heard Snooks Eaglin do this. I don't remember, but it wasn't like developed like this. But for instance, if we take an E chord, E7, stock Melbay, garden variety E7 position, and you lift up your ring finger, keep everything else in place. Okay, so now I just have that, but I have this ring finger. And what I'm going to do also is, I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this correctly. Lift off your ring finger and your index finger. So now you just have that, which is it's part of the shell of the E7. You've got the 3rd and the flat 7, G sharp, and my pinky is playing the D, 7th fret, 7th, 3rd string. So what I'm going to do is play this, that little pentatonic box shape on the bottom string. So B, D, E. Okay.
Cool.
But I'm keeping the shell on top for that flavor. So I end up with this. I'm not even using these top strings. So what you could do a lot with that, because now you could apply a rhythm like anything, or you could slide into that G. Or you move it down to the chord you're talking about, which is the same voicing. I just moved it down to 4th fret, 5th string with an open E. Now I get that sharp 9. And try that little move I just showed you, and you can get like. You can do all kinds of. And I mean, there's a lot going on my right hand that we're not talking about. And there's a lot going on the left hand. Like I'm constantly doing this to mute, not really mute, just suck the tone out of it. So that's what I'm doing. Squeezing and release really fast. Like if you just practice this. and then you add the fingers in, the other lower. You know, you can do all kinds of. That's a tune called F Thing off my record, Still Motion. So that's one simple thing that you could really get a lot of mileage out of that move. And there's a bunch more, but that's one I came up with that I use a lot.
Thanks. That's cool stuff. And I think it's just, if you take that small idea first, start with that, and then start to try to expand upon it. But a lot of it is just listening too, making sure you.
Well, yeah, you have to know where to apply it. I mean, you can't just throw it in. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it'll sound dumb, you know?
Right.
Like if you got on stage with, you know, George Porter Jr. and Zigaboo Model East and played, you know, they would be like, "What, dude? What are you doing? Like, play the rhythm, you know." Yeah. So you have to listen to know what's happening, you know.
Right. And also listen to the genre, you know, like.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, on your outside stuff too, you know, like.
Right.
So so let's talk a little bit about more. Well, first of all, where did we meet? We met in Montana, right? That was the first time we met, I think.
We met in Montana, at the guitar festival.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think I see James Hogan's online too. You remember James?
Oh man. Oh yeah. What's happening, James?
Yeah. And Jason Lachlan. You know Jason? You know Jason.
We've never met. Okay. I know he's a great player. Yeah. I've seen his videos. Yeah, he's really.
So we met there, and Dweezil was there at the time too, right? That was that year.
Dweezil,
yeah. So you went to MI?
I went to MI. Yep, sure did. It was a great year. Really cool.
Who did you study with while you were there? Besides Scott, right?
Scott was my main private teacher was Dan Gilbert, who's amazing. Dan was a big inspiration to me too. I mean, I still have a lot of little lessons that he wrote out for me, like motivational things, and he kicked my ass pretty good. I was 19 when I started MI. And Scott ended up getting me a teaching gig when I graduated.
Oh, cool.
Scott and Ron S.J., who was from home, Louisiana. He was a big guy that helped me out too. Alan Hines was there, but we didn't really hang out. You know, he was older than me, and I would sit in on his little class. At MI, they have these things called open counseling, which a player would just, kind of like we're doing now, you just sit in a chair and you could show up in a room and pick somebody's brain or like jam with them or whatever. And Alan, I would go to his, but I didn't really know Alan until, 10 years ago, because his sister lives in New Orleans. So it's just a coincidence we got to be friends that way. But who else was there? I don't remember, man. It was a great time.
Sure.
It was a really fertile time because, it was cool to be proficient on guitar back then.
How did that change? What happened? What happened? Well, I think Nirvana happened, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of it was deservedly so, I guess.
I think what happened for me was a lot of the stuff just went too far where the guitar playing became everything and there was no tunes and there was just these guitar solos.
Well, that's true. My wife listens to in her car, she has Sirius, I guess it is, and she keeps it on the metal channel sometimes. I'll get in because she likes it, and I'll get in there and I'll be like, yeah, well, I remember this. The songs weren't very good, some of them, but after a while it got to be kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But the guitar playing was always cool.
It was. And then you listen back to some of those tunes, you're like, man, that song's pretty terrible.
Yeah, but I think people thought that in the 80s about the 70s, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I think it's cool to like diss shit from 20 years ago, but or 10 years ago, but once it's 20, then all of a sudden
it's cool again, like bell bottom.
I'm telling you, man, I'm looking at all your killer amps back there, Jeff, and you should stock up on a few Rockmans because in 10 more years they'll be desirable.
Right. Everything comes around.
You need to have a stack of Rockmans in the back and
So now let's just jump. We've hung out a lot. There's some. I don't know if you can tell all the stories that you've told, but you had some really great experiences working with Daryl on Daryl's house which sounds like a really fascinating gig. Now, how did you? Obviously, you got that from working with Daryl in Hall Oates.
Actually, I got that from working with John Oates.
Oh, really? Okay.
John Oates, I was hired to play guitar on one of his solo records.
Oh.
And as a session musician, and that's how I met John. And we hit it off and kept in touch. And John was sending me mixes via email. Yeah, let me know what you think of this. Let me know. And I was like, wow, man, this guy's like super cool, you know? And my wife and I happened to be in Japan on vacation. And Oates hits me up and he goes, you said you're going to be in Japan. I said, I'm in Japan right now. And he said, me too. Let's have dinner. So we had dinner. Mm-hmm. And he goes, man, come over tomorrow to this rehearsal place I'm playing with Larry Carlton. And I said, dude, I would love to, but I'm going to, my wife's family is up in Sapporo, this beautiful city. I said, I can't do it. So this is a long story how I got the gig. So next day we land in Sapporo. I get a phone call. It's Oates. And I said, hey, man. And he goes, did Larry Carlton call you? I said, Larry Carlton? No. And he goes, his bass player, Travis, his son, he missed the flight or something. He couldn't make it. So I told him he needs a bass player. And I said, I mean, he's Larry Carlton in Japan. He's like, you know, a deity almost. Like he'll find a bass player, man. And he goes, no, I told him you played bass. And I do play bass. I play bass on records a lot, not live. But I said, man, I can't learn his stuff. And when's the gig? He said, day after tomorrow. I said, I can't. So I called Larry. He wanted me to call him. And I told my wife, just get our suitcases. I got to call this guy and turn this thing down. And Larry answers the phone and he goes, hey, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm like, you got to be shitting me, man. So long story short, I ended up doing a tour with Larry in Japan playing bass, and Oates was on the first show. And then Oates left and went back to U.S., and I ended up doing the whole tour. And when Oates saw that, I think Daryl and John were looking for somebody, and between that and doing his record and watching me play with Larry, he's told Daryl about me. And Daryl, he got in touch, and we ended up meeting in New York. And literally the next week, I met Daryl and the band. It wasn't even a week later. And the manager called me. He said, you're in. You want to do the gig? Yes or no? I need to know by tonight.
Wow.
And I said, okay, yeah. Let me think. Let me talk to him. Let me think about it. I called him back, and he goes, when you get back to New Orleans tomorrow, make sure your cell phone's on because your life is about to change. I remember he told me that. And the next morning, I looked, and I got a call, and it said Los Angeles. What is this? Yeah, this is the Reverend B.F. Gibbons looking for Shane's Cajun ass. Where is he at? And it was Billy Gibbons calling me. I was like, I had to start putting the songs together for that first episode, and nobody told me what to do. It was like there was no protocol. Like, it was just like, okay, you do it.
Wow.
And that's how the whole thing happened. And I didn't actually start playing with Hall Oates, the band, until the next year. So that was fall of 2013. And then we didn't do our first Hall & Oates show until, I think, May of the next year. So yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster ride for sure. Got to play with a lot of great artists. Of course, Daryl and John, they're both legendary artists and legends, and they're really, really, it's a beautiful organization. It's like a family.
That's great.
The band, it's like, I look around, I go, nobody has any vices or addictions or drama. What's wrong here? No, I've never dealt with anything like that before.
I only met Oates through you in Montana, and I was surprised at how he just hung out and talked about blues. You know, he's just a dude.
Oh yeah, he's real down to earth and approachable.
Yeah,
Oates is very, very approachable and very down to earth. And
now, do you have? I'm sure you've got a lot of memorable moments from the show. Can you care to share some of the ones that we've talked about? Some that you can tell.
Once my disclaimer will allow me to. What is non-disclosure agreement will allow?
Right.
Let's see. I don't know, man. Name an artist.
Billy Gibbons. Let's start with Billy.
Billy. Let's see. Well, yeah, Billy. he wanted to do, well, first of all, let me think about this. There's a bunch of Billy Gibbons stories. But there was a tune called, what is it called? Love You Like a Brother.
Okay.
It's a Hall Oates song. Billy wanted to just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact song. I haven't played it since that day. But it's got a lot of these, it's got all these kind of, these kind of Philly chords in it,
Mm-hmm.
But the key center was G major. And so Billy's right next to me. Now, I just started on this gig. It was my first. I didn't know what was going on with that for that particular episode. And Billy's standing next to me, and I could see that every time I would play one of these chords or that kind of thing, I could see him behind his glasses because he's right here. I'm like, he would just sort of he couldn't process it. It was like he was almost cringing, like the sound was offensive, the major seven, like. His Texas psyche is like, what is that kind of chord? But he wanted to do the song. So then it came to, I realized he didn't really know the song. He didn't really know the chords. And I leaned over to Billy and I said, hey man, I got all the rhythm shit. You just play G blues, man. Do your magic, And then he got comfortable and I remember we were playing it and I remember he leaned over to me and he goes, I think I'm going to just BB King this one. And that's all he did. So he was going, and he would do his cool strut and, but it's Billy and it sounds magical when he plays it and he looks so cool and everything. So anyway, the episode comes out and this friend of mine gets on one of these guitar forums or something and everybody's talking about Billy Gibbons, the episode, the Daryl's House episode. And he goes, man, you got to read these comments. So I started reading these comments and, it was pretty funny because there was one comment where he goes, notice how Billy is schooling the entire band on restraint and teaching them about it. And I'm like, well, actually, he didn't really know what he was doing. So there's a lot of, now I'm not, believe me,
no.
Man, Billy Gibbons is God. That was, it just goes to show you like coolness trumps knowing what you're doing, it doesn't even matter. It was like he just did his thing, played two notes, But yeah, Billy's cool, and we've stayed in touch. And I actually saw him in Nashville in December. I was with Oates recording, and we in a Mexican restaurant. There was Billy with his guitar tech with a mound of Mexican food. Yeah, he had this a guitar player named Audley Freed had given me this. It was Audley, or it was a sound guy that used to work for. Am I talking too much?
No,
man?
This is great. No.
I've had a lot of coffee this morning.
Me too.
A sound guy used to work for ZZ Top gave me this little chart, and it says the Reverend B.F. Gibbons, and it says the Hertz Cross, and it's a diagram of a guitar neck. It looks like this Mel Bay kind of guitar neck where you write out voicings, and it's got every corresponding frequency to each note on the guitar, like 800 hertz, 600 hertz, whatever. So, and Billy designed it, and it has Reverend Billy F. Gibbons, 1982. And it's written out and Xeroxed a million times, and I had a PDF of it. So when I met Billy, we would talk a lot of stuff about New Orleans and Dr. John and all this in an oyster place he likes called Casamento. So we kind of hit it off, and I said, Billy, do you remember the Hertz Cross? And he took his glasses. He goes, you know about the Hertz Cross? I go, I have it on my laptop. He goes, I forgot all about it, so I sent it to him.
Awesome.
And when we saw him in December, I said, Billy, you still got the Hertz Cross? And he pulled out all his credit cards, and he had one laminated. He goes, would you like one? I have some extras. So I'll have to send it to you because it's just I guess it's when he would do a sound check, he could tell I don't know a lot about Billy, but I think he's probably in the frequencies. Like he's a very smart guy. And when we did that show, the only pedal he had was a Boss EQ pedal, regular Boss EQ pedal, and he plugged into a Magnetone amp, and that's it. And he had it like a weird scoop, like a lot of bass. I should have taken a picture of it. I didn't think about it, but anyway, that's one story.
That's a great story.
I'm trying to think of the guitar stories because they're usually not guitar stories. But
Well, there's a few. Joe Walsh, I'm a huge fan. What was like that one like?
I wasn't on that
You
episode.
weren't?
That
Okay.
was the other
Somebody was asking. They were
yeah.
asking that too about the Joe Walsh.
Yeah.
But you were on
No,
the
I'm
Cheap
sure that
Trick
was great.
episode, right? That sounded like that.
Yeah, I was on Cheap Trick.
That sounds like fun.
That was loud.
We were talking about
Loud.
that. Yeah.
It was, yeah, that was the first episode. I was talking to Tom Peterson on the phone about the set list, and Rick Nielsen comes in with 2 Marshalls, and granted, this is in Daryl's club. It's just a medium-sized club, you know, not high ceilings or whatever. And I remember Rick's guitar tech go, well, Rick's on like almost stage level volume right now, and I'm thinking, well, we're in a club, you know. So I had my old Marshall, and then Daryl comes in and he sees all the Marshalls, and he goes, the day before he sees Seta, excuse me, and he goes, well, I should have a Marshall. So he tells the guitar tech, go over to the warehouse and get my Marshall. And then Tom Peterson comes in with, he uses, I think, an orange amp with a Marshall, the bass player. So everybody's got Marshalls. And we start recording. It is, man, it's so loud. You can't hear I remember thinking to myself, this is going to sound terrible. Like, it sounds like a wall of sound, mush. And I remember Rick Nielsen, he goes, I can't hear him. And he points to Brian, the drummer. And he goes, you need to turn him up. Like, the theory of turning things down doesn't occur. And Darryl goes, yeah, me too. Turn me up. Up. So we're playing, and I've got a cabinet pointed right at Daryl's head. It's pretty friggin' loud, man, and everything's pointed. And I've worked with a lot of singers, and they're all sensitive to volume, but Daryl is not one of them. And I'm looking at him while we were playing one of these tunes, and it feels great because you're playing loud and it's energy, and you know you're on camera. And I look at Daryl, and I'm wondering if it's too loud, and his eyes are closed, and he's like this. It's just like ecstasy of the, you know, like the sound, like everybody's digging it. So that's what I love about it. It's just, but that one came out pretty good. I guess. I think it sounds pretty good.
Oh, that was awesome, man. So in those gigs, is there anything that you felt like changed you as a player, doing all this kind of, meeting all those people or playing with those heroes, or just having, I'm sure your band leader skills were certainly pushed to the test because everything is being put on you, I'm sure, right? Last minute stuff, dealing with personalities, sorting with things, and, you know.
It is, well, you nailed it. I mean, a lot of that gig, or a lot of, you know, if I've had any sort of success or any advice to give anybody that wants to be a, you know, sideman, it's a game of psychology. I mean, I'm not saying you're a bullshitter or you're a fake person, but you have to know how to make an artist feel comfortable. Or is it, you know, I do a lot of producing too. You have to make an artist feel comfortable while getting what you need out of the artist to make, you know, to do the record, do the session, do the TV taping, whatever it is. And sometimes you're dealing with a lot of type A personalities, and I'm used to that. I'm used to being dropped in like a parachute guy into the midst of some war zone shit. Mm-hmm. I've done it a bunch of times. You know, Leanne Rimes had just fired a guitar player, and the band didn't like her over that, and I had to come in and do 2 TV shows. I'm used to turmoil. You have to be used to pressure, and you have to be nice to people, you know. But one of the first lessons I ever learned, I remember, was Neville Brothers. There were 4 brothers, you know. There's Art, Aaron, Charles, and Cyril. And I'm 25 years old, and there's one tune that I'm on the gig 1 week, and there's one tune we did. It was People Get Ready into One Love. It was a medley. And when we went into One Love, it stops and the guitar kicks it off. I haven't played this in years, but it's so. Oh. I forget how it was, but it was a skank part, and the rhythm had to be tight, and it had to be a certain tempo. And I blew it one night, man. It was terrible. And the next night it was a little better, but the drummer looked at me and he's like, bro, you got to get that shit together, man. We'll do this and compensate. And all right. And I'm, you know, real nervous, and we're walking off stage, and Aaron Neville goes, Shane, bro, you gotta get that tempo, man. Come on, listen. I'm sorry, man. I got it. It's never gonna happen again. And Cyril, hey, bro, it's cool, bro, but, you know, pick it up a little bit tomorrow. Got it. No problem. I got it. Charles Neville, Shane Theriot, got to pick that motherfucker up. I got it, bro. Don't worry. Art Neville comes over, cigarette, say, bro, that shit was killer. But look, One Love. And I said, I know, man, it's never going to happen again, Art. I'm going to pick it up. He goes, no, no, no. Hold that shit exactly the way you got it. That's the way it needs to be every night. Do not move that tempo. And I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? So I stayed up all night worrying about, you're so young, you're thinking, I don't remember how I got out of it, but it's a game of like psychology, man. Kenny Loggins was on Daryl's show, and that was a challenging one because Kenny is he wants his songs specific a certain way, because you got to realize, man, these artists, these songs are like their kids, and they're walking into a studio band, and there's 20 people around, cameraman, and everybody's around, and it's like there's no rehearsals. People, I notice that people don't believe that, but there are no rehearsals for Daryl's house. I get together with Daryl and we'll go over the songs and maybe look at the lyrics and the melody. That's it. There's no band rehearsal. So an artist comes in, man, they're nervous, even though they're a legend. They don't know what they're getting, and you have to be able to make them feel comfortable. And if things go south in the middle of the taping, you have to know how to. Kenny wants to change a key in the middle of a taping. I have to shut it down because all the horn charts have already been done in the arrangement, and you got 30 people on union, whatever it is. It's like you can't do that, and I have to be the one to go over there and diffuse it. I remember Kenny told me we were doing one of these tunes, and he leaned over to me and he goes, yeah, I was playing the intro, and he goes, I want you to pretend like you were like a New Orleans guitar player. Like, I know you're a rock and roll guy, but pretend like you're more New Orleans. And I go, is this guy bullshitting me? And we're taping, and I'm like, you see that road case over there? One of my old road cases says Neville Brothers. Doesn't get much more New Orleans than that, but you have to know how to just let shit bounce off, and
Right.
Anyway,
well,
blah blah.
No, this is extremely valuable stuff, and I think a lot of people. It's the same in any world, but one of your keys to your success, besides being a great guitar player, is understanding when it's not about you. And how do you, your job is to make everything happen, and being able to, I don't want to say stow your ego, because you have to have enough of one that people respect you and don't feel like you're just a schlub or a pushover or something. And then you have to have enough to be confident enough that you're like, yeah, man, Kenny, act like a New Orleans guitar player. Like, you have no idea who I am. Like, you think you at least know, like in this situation, you just have to be able to go,
of course.
Yeah. Okay, this isn't about me.
He's the nicest guy. Yeah. It's not about you.
Right, exactly.
It's about their song and how is it all going to sound.
Yeah.
And, that's what it's about. And you have people from the channel there, and they want to know, how's this going to look? How's this going to, it's not about your tube screamer pedal or your solo take, or I wish I could go back and do all those. So hardly ever get any second takes on anything. Yeah, definitely no third takes.
Yeah, but you sound great on all those, man. Like, I know we all love that. The same way you even all your records too. By the way, you have you got my knee there. I'm wearing shorts. Shorts on TV. We talked about that, right?
Shorts are cool.
Yeah, we. Even on your record, there's probably things you're like, oh man, I wish I can go back and do that, and
Yeah, they're a little more forgiving on records because you do have that opportunity,
right.
But yeah.
But let's. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the show basically. There's endless stories, and I'm very blessed to be a part of it, and it's a great organization. So
awesome, man. Now you have your own podcast, Riff Raff.
I do, yeah. It's been a little dormant lately, but yeah, I do. I have a few episodes I need to finish up.
So everybody can find those on your website, or if not,
it's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on Stitcher, it's on Podbay. It's all over the place now.
I really enjoy it, man. I think they're super smart, and you got great people on there. I really enjoyed the Wayne Krantz one. You guys are playing together, and the time stuff. That was some deep stuff. That was great. I really enjoyed that one. Yeah. And you have your latest solo record, which I really dug, man. I told you that in person, but it's a great record. You want to talk a little bit? Who's on the record? Then I want to get to everybody's questions. And
that record, wow, yeah, that was sort of my New York moment record. That's Kirk Covington on drums from Tribal Tech was a big part of it, and Jim Keltner's on it, and on drums, and who else? I don't want to miss anybody else. Johnny Vodakovich. It's the first record I've ever done with an upright bass, which was a challenge. And I tried to keep it real stripped down in trio, which I've been checking out a lot of New York stuff. I was living in New York at the time, full time. And I don't know, it influenced me a lot. So I kept it real dry and real sparse. Who else is on that record? Nate Wood played on one tune, but mostly that's pretty much the core guys, you know.
It's a really great record.
It's called Still Motion. Thank you.
Yeah, really great playing, and it shows your breadth as a player, all the things that you can do. I really enjoyed it. Really great. So I got to read some questions. I'm going to go
sure.
A lot of people here today. Ken Porcaro. Hey, man, Ken.
Oh, yeah, sure.
From Montana. I live in New Jersey, friend of mine. Let's just give a few shout-outs to everyone. Thomas Moore, Mike Anderson, David Skinner, Earl Farrier, S.E. Nesbitt, a lot of guys who come for the show. And some new people here today. We got a lot of people on. Graham Ross, Michael Cope, Tom Manette. Hey, 5 Watt World. Hey, what's up, Keith? How you doing? Okay, so get to these questions. I'm missing people, too. Bill has highlighted the questions for me. Can you talk about your 330 that you're holding right now? Oh, you changed.
330, sure.
Yeah. You just changed.
This guitar is a 1959 330. I found it in a guitar. I found it actually, believe it or not, it was in Guitar Center, but it was in the private room or whatever. I went in there one Sunday to kill time, and those are like usually the most dangerous times to go looking guitars, you know, when you're not looking for anything. Anyway, it was hanging on the wall, man. It was beat to hell. I mean, it's still beat to hell, but if you can see, it had all these were holes. Somebody back in the day tragically tried to convert this to a left hand and drilled holes into it, put all the electronics on this side. Mm-hmm. It had Scotch tape, yellowed Scotch tape holding the binding. It was a mess. I plugged it up and it just felt amazing. It was like an old soul was trapped inside here, man. It just resonated, and I just loved the guitar. Paid way too much for it. They wouldn't give me a deal. Ended up, well, I thought about it for 2 days, bought the thing. Actually, John Oates took it to Nashville for me one time and got, I forget the guy's name at Classic Axe, I think. He tried to fix it as best as possible. I mean, obviously it's a player guitar. And then another guy named Will Kelly did some work on it from Vintage Guitar Magazine. He actually did a whole story on this guitar. It's in Vintage Guitar. He changed the nut, did a few things. But then Matt, what's his name, at 30th Street Guitars in Manhattan. Matt Brewster. Yeah. That guy went through and fixed the wiring harness because it was all tangled, and he said yes, everything's original. It's 59. It's the first year they made 330s, evidently. It's got the cool neck, it's a beautiful neck. Mm-hmm. So that's this guitar, and I it's good for some things and not good for other things, but it always feels great. It's ergonomically, it's like really balanced. You know, I don't know a lot about the scale length type things, but sometimes Gibsons feel the scale length throws me off a bit, but this one feels amazing, and it sounds so good. Yeah, so that's that guitar.
That's awesome.
This guitar.
It's beautiful, and I love when they find you.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like you just when you pick them up, you know it's kind of right, and the thing about the vintage guitar thing, we were just talking a little bit beforehand. I have an old Strat. It was the same thing. I played it, and I've played a bunch and gone, whatever, you know, but when you play one and you're suddenly, now I get it. This thing is, there's something there's something magical or going on that so.
Well, I really feel that with acoustic guitars even more than electrics. You know, I have some nice acoustics, and I did a session on Tuesday, a record for this songwriter, and I brought my I have a 52 Gibson J45, and the thing it just paid for itself like in the first year. Like you pull that out of the case into a session, and it just, man, you can't lose it. Every engineer loves it. any mic, it's like it's money, and it's just because it's so the wood has aged so much. I guess it just sounds great. The old Martins, I like the small body mahogany ones too. They sound great,
especially for recording, like you said.
Recording, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
yeah.
I don't really use them live.
5 Watt World. Keith Williams got a great YouTube page that everybody here probably knows, obviously knows. So he's saying that you've done so many interesting gigs as a sideman. What sort of stuff do you write for yourself?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that because this is the first year, because of this situation with coronavirus, that I've ever had any time to do any my own things. So I've got a few things up on YouTube and Instagram of vocal tunes. I've been singing some things this year. I don't know, man. I'm like experimenting with styles. I mean, I would guess it's versed in funk rock, but I've always liked quirky chord changes. It's just the way I hear things. So I don't know if, what was the question? If it's what style?
Yeah, just what sort of stuff do you want to write? What sort of stuff do you write for yourself?
Well, I mean, my solo records speak for themselves.
Right.
It's instrumental stuff. But the new things, I mean, if you want to check out some stuff on YouTube, there's 3 or 4 things. I've recorded 8 new tunes since the coronavirus. Vocals, everything's done. And I don't know how to describe it. It's not like the most original thing in the world. That's not why I'm saying that. It's just, I think it would be funk, rooted in funk. Even the acoustic things have a rhythm, a strong rhythmic roots with interesting chord changes. There you go. There's the answer.
I kind of find it like rootsy, like whatever that means to me. But yeah, that's perfect. What was it like playing with Ricky Lee Jones?
Well, Ricky's she can be challenging. I mean, and she's a brilliant genius songwriter. I've never done any live things. I've done 2 records with Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
And I produced a vocal. I got her to sing on Dr. John's album, his last album, which I produced, that will be out probably later this year. And I got Ricky to sing background vocals on it. She's got an amazing ear. She's hears melodies and harmonies, and like she's very demanding.
Mm-hmm.
She's sweet, but you got to have your shit together. Like, we did a tune, there's a record we did called Kicks that just came out this year. Was it this year? It's a great record, man. It's like all covers, called Kicks. And I played on that whole record, and we did a tune called, I forget what it is. I forget the name of the tune, but it's basically, we're recording this in the it's like an old 1940s thing, so it's rhythm changes, so it's like, and then she's like, okay, Shane, you take a solo on that. I'm like, that's if I can play rhythm changes, but that is a fast friggin' tempo,
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to get it together, and kind of watched her lose her patience a few times, but she does that with drummers, and I don't know. I'm trying not to say a lot about. I mean, I love Ricky.
It was challenging. She's well known for being very.
She's well known. I mean, Jeff Porcaro, famous story I knew before I even knew Ricky. Famous story, Jeff Porcaro, where in Modern Drummer magazine, I believe you could read it. She kept telling him to play hit harder. I want this ballad. I needs to have more energy. I want to hit harder, harder. And Carl in the interview goes, I was physically hitting as hard as I could. I dented the heads. I just changed the heads. And then she said, I want harder. You're not hitting hard enough. And they do another take, and he actually broke his drum head. And he goes, okay, I was losing my patience. I said, let's take a break. Everybody take lunch. I'm going to change this head, and I have a different idea. So he told the engineer, he goes, bring some candles in, light the studio, dim it. That way when I come in the second verse, it's going to be huge, and Ricky will think it's it's even bigger, Mm-hmm. And even though he was playing as hard as he could. So Ricky's like, it's a great idea. So they start the tape. Porcaro kicks it off. Well, he had like all the way through the second verse sitting out. So he's about to come in with his big drum entrance, and there's nothing. Stop the tape. Look in the drum booth, turn the lights on. He's gone. He's in the parking lot. Screw it, I'm going home.
That's pretty funny.
So there's a lot of stories like that, and I witnessed it. I could see that. But she's been nothing but sweet to me, and the stuff she did on Dr. John's record when it comes out, man, she's so killer. I mean, it gives me chills when I went through to produce her vocal. And there was on the Kicks record, there's an Elton John tune we did together, just her and I on acoustic, and her like staring me in the eye, like right through the booth while we're recording, and I'm cueing. It was like, there's some goosebump moments, She's one of my favorite singers.
So yeah, and that's just part of it. Like, that's what makes her so great, is that that level of perfection that they want, and
right.
They're temperamental. It's just that some great artists are, Not all of them, but some of them are.
No. Yeah, well, that's what makes their music great.
Exactly. Thomas Moore wants to know, is Daryl's House coming back?
Well, we taped, it is back. It's on Access TV.
Okay.
It's every Sunday and Monday night, I believe. And we did tape some new episodes. Right now, they're just showing older episodes. Without getting into the whole business point of things that I don't know about or can't discuss, I mean, there's a lot of legal stuff involved. Like, people are like, why don't you just put them all out? You really can't do that. You have to pay royalties every couple of years to song. It's very complicated. So right now, Access has re-upped, I think, 15 episodes. So they're showing some of the episodes. Then there was a thing about HD. They couldn't show any of the old ones. Had to be in HD, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, man.
But I think it is, we've taped a few in the can, and I believe they're going to see the light of the day. But it's on Access TV right now.
Excellent. Jennifer Kramer wants to know, do you have a favorite city to play in?
I like Los Angeles. I like the Greek Theater a lot. I like there's so many, I like LA. I like New York. I like Tokyo. I like playing in New Orleans too. I mean, it's not really a fair question. But, I mean, it is a fair question, but it really depends on the audience. I mean, I think the audiences in New York are always more intense, which makes you play better. So you'll see a better gig performance-wise. But sometimes the audiences can be a bit jaded, because they hear so much great shit all the time. So sometimes you got to realize when you're on stage, you're only feeding off the energy of the audience, and it doesn't matter if you're in Des Moines. Like, if you have a killer audience, you'll go, wow, I love playing there, man, Des Moines, So I don't know, it just depends. I like playing, as long as it sounds good, it doesn't really matter where it is. I generally have good shows in those cities that I said, though.
It all comes down to the audience. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, small gig, huge gig, as long as the audience is into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there's those nights where you're like, I'm working my hardest here. Come on, people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And nobody's...
Yeah.
I ask this question of some people because it's just fun. Do you have like one of your worst gigs, like experience you're like just a comedy of errors or something like that? Do you have any of those kind of moments? Those are always kind of fun because they happen. I was talking to Angus Clark, and he was saying on the show that the same thing that happened to you when you're in your first gig still happens to you on stadiums. Like Spinal Tap. The transmitter will pick up the radio or something like that. Those kind of things. No,
I never. I can't say I've ever actually had a really bad experience. I've been on some gigs that I didn't like, but it's been a long time.
But I mean, more funny, like for instance,
like embarrassing. Yeah, there was I think it was with the Nevilles. We did Roseanne when Roseanne had a television show a long time ago. We did that show, and there was a tune called I forget the name of the tune, but the guitar kicked it off cold, man, and it was a drop D with a capo position, and no, it was drop D, but I didn't drop the D. I didn't drop the E down. And you're on TV, so I had to start the tune off, and it sounded really weird. But I played it like with some attitude and just stared, like, yeah, this is right. Why are you looking at me? Like, I sold it enough to where there was a pause for a minute while there was a drum fill, and then I just reached over and grabbed the tuner, and that's probably a whole step. Boom, right into it, and it was enough to get through the song. And
oh, cool.
It's not really a good example of what you're talking about. I've never really had any.
I'm just
Man, I've been really lucky. I haven't been on stage and ever thought, this sucks. I hate this. I mean, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's been a few gigs, but I haven't really ever had an embarrassing moment on stage. I mean, knock on wood. I haven't fell down on stage or anything like that.
Like, here's an example. This isn't me. This is a friend of mine who's a jazz singer. She had this gig in New York. It was a weird thing. She was she's a jazz singer, and they had a tap dancer and a piano player. And it was like this cool show they had worked out. You know, so they have this high-end gig. It was at a party, you know, like a really good paying gig. And the piano player couldn't make the gig because his car broke down. So she had to sing a cappella jazz gig with a tap dancer. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff is. I just thought that was one of the funniest.
Yeah, no, I've never had that hip to happen.
It's kind of funny. I just imagine. She said it was a whole day of an hour of cold sweat. Just like, how can I? What next? What I got to do next? You know. We get some more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So thanks so much for being here, man, to giving us your time today.
Oh, man, thank you for asking, yeah.
Cletus Flynn wants to know, what is your process in approaching a difficult rhythm pattern and chord progression?
A difficult rhythm pattern. Well, if I write it myself, it's not really difficult. Like, in other words, I don't really... Yeah. I'm sorry, if it means I'm reading something difficult, or because let's see, how could I answer that? I think I know what he's asking, but if I make up a rhythm myself, I can play it. It's not, I don't like work on things and go like a drum thing where I'm going to work on the black page or some kind of weird drum part and try to do it. I don't do that. So I don't know how to answer that question. What is it? You read it one more time. I approach it different.
Yeah, just if you, I guess in my breakdown of here. Okay, when you, oh, wrong question. Hold on, I lost it. I'm scrolling through the questions. Okay, what is your process on approaching a difficult rhythm pattern and chord progression? I guess if you just something, just
well, I guess it would be like here's a generic answer that's very valuable that would encompass a wide whatever, regardless of what you're asking about. Just break it down into very small chunks. You know, like if I'm working on a difficult chord progression, like for instance, if I wanted to learn giant steps, okay, which is a lot of people have trouble with that because they're not typical chords. I would just break it down. I would get the chart, and I would just go, okay, that's it. I would just learn the first 3 chords, and I would spend probably 5 minutes. Or I would learn the bass line first too, you know. Bass movements, root movements help out a lot for chord progressions. Break it down into very small, bite-sized, learnable phrases. Even if you take the first line, which would be, that's it. That would be like a day's practice. I would work on that for about 20 minutes. And I would put it away and I would review it. And then the next day or later that day, I would try to connect it. And when you do things like that, you'll be amazed that after 3 days, if you really focus on it, not doodle around and do this and try to learn the whole thing in one day, but focus on the first line, something that you can easily absorb and master before you walk away. Add the next part to it and the next part to it. And that goes for if you're working on a rhythm part, chord progression, playing over changes, technique, any of that stuff. That's been the most valuable thing to me. Break it down into little phrases.
Yeah.
You know,
bite-sized things that you can.
Bite-sized things to learn and then stack. Then keep stacking. Learn the next phrase and stack it. And then before you know it, man, you can master a pretty complex piece of music that way. You know.
I think it's the only way to do it.
Well, I wrote a column on this a long time ago, but I didn't make it up. But when I was at GIT, Howard Roberts, who was the famous LA studio guitar player and one of the founders of GIT, he's the guy that played, that's Howard Roberts. he did a lot of famous sessions in 50s, 60s. Anyway, he was a brilliant educator, and he was into like learning techniques, accelerated learning techniques. And briefly, I'll just say he has this approach where he said that the average person's attention span is around 20 minutes on any given subject at one time. Now, these days it may be less than that. I don't know. But the point is, here's how you can use that. You build your own practice schedule, and you say, okay, I don't know what the person asked the question, what style he's into, but if you wanted to learn a Stevie Ray Vaughan solo, or if you want to learn the changes to giant steps, or if you want to learn technique, you break a section down that you can master and just work on it for 20 minutes. You just focus on that. That's it. And I remember Howard told us to get an egg timer. This is way before iPhones. And you set the timer, 20 minutes, walk away. And during the 20 minutes, you don't start playing blues licks and answer your phone. You focus. And if you do that, even 15 minutes of focused practice like that, you'd be amazed how much you would get done, because we waste a lot of time doodling and, noodling around. But if you really focus and you put everything together in a schedule like that, you can master huge chunks of information. And that was one thing I learned from Howard Roberts.
That's a great piece of advice. I teach the same thing. Even 5 minutes. You're working on
even 5 minutes if it's focused.
Yep.
It's like it's like going to the gym, which I don't do, but I've heard
I've heard stories.
like you do. Yeah, I've heard people lift weights and like a focused rep. They say where you put your intent into it. Like you're actually visualizing your muscle growing, and you feel it. You're not watching TV and doing this. You're actually focusing. And like you said, 5 minutes of focused practice with intent is probably better than an hour sitting around and not really giving all your attention to something.
Yeah.
I would think. I'm not an expert on it, but I've found it to help me out a lot.
Well, I've read up, read up on that kind of stuff and teach a lot. And one thing that I like to do and talk to students about, even just looking at your hand when you're practicing something, just makes you play better, because you just, it's in your head. And also there's done studies like with basketball players and musicians that if you think about you're imagining the layup or the free throw, or you're imagining the scale in your head, even before you play it, you actually play it better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So now the nerdy questions. Yeah. People want to know, what guitar is that?
This is a Melanson. This was built by my dear friend who passed away last year, named Gerard Melanson. He was a very talented luthier, lived about an hour from here. He's got plenty of guitars on. This one he built about 20 years ago. He signed it for me. And I've got three different Melanson instruments. And I always called him the Cajun Sadowski. He was a friend of Roger Sadowski. He was a very respected builder who never cared about being famous as a guitar builder. He never wanted to expand. So he has a little cinder block building. He had about an hour and a half from here. And great instruments. I mean, if you look them up on eBay or whatever guitar sites, you'll see they hold their value. And so this is, I think it was called a custom T model. And over the years, he's done a lot of modifications to it. This pickup, actually, Jeff, when we were at the Iridium that time, Steve Blucher was there, right?
Yeah.
Sitting with us at the table. He wound this pickup.
Oh, nice.
And he gave it to Gerard. And I was at Gerard's shop one day, and it was laying there. And I kept complaining. This had a JB in it originally, and I didn't really like it for everything. And he said, let me try this pickup because Steve sent me this, and I think you might like it. And, man, the whole guitar just changed.
Okay.
It came alive. And then I had him put I had this guitar that somebody had sent me that had these Ingve speed pots in it. And I liked it. The feel of it was killer. So I had Gerard put in one of those speed pots in it. And then he put some other kind of tone control that I really liked. I forget. He said they were really good. And it's wired to where I can do split coil. But the middle position on this guitar is the humbucker and the bridge. So I get that rhythm. I can get more of a... I can get a what do do you call it? A Gibson-y thing, you know? It's got more pop to it.
Yeah.
But it's a very versatile guitar. You can get a lot of sounds. You can play, the tone really rolls a lot. You can get really dark with it. So I love this guitar.
That's great. All right. Well, I want to say, I think been doing this for an hour. I want to say thanks so much for coming and hanging out, dude, and appreciate it. And it's been fun. Once again,
everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. If you can, excuse me, that's an allergies drive me nuts. I'm like muting me coughing while you're talking. In the description, we have Shane's website, and he's got his TrueFire courses. If you love some of the stuff that he's playing, you break it all down. You got background tracks and tabs, notation, all that stuff. And as I said, when you buy those TrueFire courses through my website or Shane's website, we actually get a higher percentage.
Oh yeah.
We love the people at TrueFire, and they're so great with that. Like, if you sell it, you guys go nuts. And so it's really, we see that right away. So if you want to help Shane out, that's the direct way to do that. Same with me. And I will be here on Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m. with the lesson. And then next Saturday at 11 is Ben Unson. You know Ben Unson? Have you heard Ben Unson play guitar?
Yes, we haven't met, but we have a mutual friend, and we're in touch on Instagram. Man, he's a burning player.
We haven't met. We've just been in touch on Instagram, and he lives in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's what everybody
I know.
does,
So we've been back and forth, and yeah, go check him out. EUNSON. He's well known on Instagram. I just, I think there's an age differential at times, where you're like, oh, that guy, that's an Instagram. And he's such a great guitar player. I'm looking forward to having him on the show. And so that'll be next Saturday morning at 11, as always. And so thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks to Phil for moderating, as always. And yeah, man, thanks, Shane.
Thank you,
right,
Jeff.
We'll
Enjoy.
see you guys later.
It's fun.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Hold on.